Dear students, dear AUA community, within the framework of Foundations of Management course, I'm glad to welcome Mr. Manuk Hergnyan, who is our guest speaker. Mr. Hergnyan is a co-founder and managing director at Granatus Ventures, which is the first venture capital firm in Armenia. He's also running the company EV Consulting, one of the most visionary and interesting companies in Armenia. What they do, the goals and the objectives of the company can be summarized in one short phrase, which is about making the Armenia competitive through advisory and consultancy of businesses. So through making separate businesses competitive, this way the company is trying to arrive to the point of the Armenian economy to become competitive as well. They are authoring many papers and publications. The recent one was in 2017, one of the recent ones, the Armenia Competitiveness Report, which is around 100-page document, a very interesting one. So I advise you to download that one. It's a free source and read it. It has very interesting insights about our country. Let's welcome Mr. Hergnyan.
Good morning. First of all, thank you, Arsen, for inviting me. And also thank you for a very good summary of what we are doing. Actually, I've never thought of that way of summarizing of our activities in a very short, concise way of what we are doing. When Arsen suggested me to meet with you, I thought, what would be the most interesting topic that we can discuss? Given that you are on your midway in your education in AUA, I thought probably it's the right time to reflect on the goals and decision making. So since you have a good background, and I hope that you will also participate with your thoughts and ideas rather than just sitting and listening of what I'm talking about, my experience on some of the theoretical concepts. Please be active. I want to start with the question, and it's the question to you. Why we need goals? To have direction. Can you also tell your name? Lucina. Tell it again.
What direction goes where we need to go.
Okay, what do you mean by direction?
The point which is very important for us, for that woman.
Okay. Okay. Any other ideas? Why we need goals at all? There may be some point that we don't need goals. Anyone thinking that we don't need goals? So pretty good consensus that we need goals. So sense of direction, what else? The goal seems to be one of the most important ideas in human life. And you only have one idea why we need goals? And you cannot reflect why we need goals?
To grow and to become someone better, to develop yourself.
Okay, that's a good idea. What else? Please, go ahead.
To have meaning.
Wow. Of what?
In life.
We're gonna touch that topic. Okay, let me tell you about an incident that happened to me 2 days ago. This Saturday, actually, I was walking in the garden, in the Lovers Garden, Pushkin Garden, just 200-300 meters from here, with my wife after the hard day in some gloomy mood. And then suddenly we noticed an old woman who was sitting there, and it seems he was kind of set up there. She seems to be homeless, and set up a bed. And we thought maybe we should approach her and ask about her story. First, what struck me actually is how, when she looked at us, I was expecting to see the very dirty or not very well prepared or in a gloomy mood person. However, what struck me first is her shining face and her positive energy. It seems that she was spending her nights there. She was demonstrating for already 7 years. She was 81 years old. She was a victim of unfairness, and she lost her apartment, and she was fighting for that for already 7 years. And she had some renewed hope with the new government, and she was trying again and again. And actually, what struck me most is that she said, even if I had a palace to live, I would still come to here to fight for my cause. That was a very, very strong lesson to me. First of all, about positive energy, and a second about the goal she had. She had a grand goal she was obsessed with, and she was trying to achieve that, whatever it takes to do so. First of all, I think we need goals because the goals gives us some determination. We need goals because the goals provide us with the energy to live and act. We need goals because they provide us with the answer to the question of why of any action, the meaning of any action, why we're doing anything at all. I want to a little bit reflect on this interrelationship between the goals, the values, and decisions. I want to make an argument that goals determine our decisions. Our decisions shape and impact our values, and the values drive our goals. So basically, and this is a constant feedback loop that we can experience throughout our life in many different life situations. Think about this framework whenever you're trying to understand the underlying causes of your actions and your decisions and how you can adjust your goals. Just having this in mind, let's move on. I want to make another argument about the hierarchy of goals. First of all, we have kind of grand goals, the first order goals, the most important goals in a specific setting. And then we have some intermediate goals that support the first order goals, and then we have some short-term smaller goals that support our intermediate goals, which in their turn support the first order goals. So that's why I think it's important to distinguish between the higher and lower goals, because they're much more important goals, and there are goals of lower importance. We have to avoid the confusion between the goals and the means. Sometimes we are confused in our actions because we confuse the goals with the means. How we can find the first order goals? One hint that I can give you is to try to ask why. By asking why, you can come to the first order goal. The why, the question why always helps you to arrive in understanding what is the first order goal and what is the intermediate goal. And I want to make an argument that first order goals are always existential ones. Okay, let me explain what I mean by that. However, in order to explain it to you, I want to do a thought experiment, the results of which I would like you, some of you that would like to send to me later after this presentation. The thought experiment is the following. Start with a goal. It can be any goal in any setting. It could be your personal goal, it could be your career goal, your professional goal, any goal. Ask why I need to achieve this goal. After arriving to an answer, ask the same question again. Repeat at least 4 or 5 times. That's the critical precondition. Be brutally frank about your answers. If you feel you are not frank, start asking again and start examining yourself again. So being brutally frank is an important condition of this thought experiment. And then tell yourself, and if you wish to share myself, also send it to me, what are the ideas, thoughts and themes you arrived at last iteration? Is the thought experiment clear? I have a hypothesis. I have, I have a hypothesis here that after the 4 or 5 iterations, you would come to the most important questions, and those questions would evolve around the question of meaning of life, eternity, God. If you don't do that, if you don't arrive to those questions, just let me know. I'll be interested to learn about that. Do you have any questions? No questions so far? Did you expect to think about to learn about this thought experience in this room? Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about goals in some other settings. In the management context. In the management context, there are 2 major systems that are fundamentally based on the use of goals in management. First, it's objectives or key results or OKR approach that was pioneered at Intel Corporation, popularized by John Doerr, who was working at that time at Intel and then moved to become a venture capital investor, invested in Google and helped Google set up the system, and then popularized by John Doerr and Google themselves, and now it's one of the most popular systems of management system based on goals, objectives, and key results. And second is Kaplan and Norton management system, which was preceded by the balanced scorecard system that Kaplan and Norton developed back in early 90s and then evolved to become a whole management system. It started as a complement to pure financial metrics and developed into a comprehensive strategy development and execution system. And the key feature here is that you start with a goal setting on the top and then cascade it down to each employee with a constant feedback loop to adjust it. So just a few more details about this. These two systems. Objectives reflect the goals and intentions. They have to be realistic, they have to be tangible, they have to provide a clear value for the company. Key results are the hows, the measurable milestones, described outcomes, no activities. In Kaplan and Norton management system, you start with a strategy articulation. You develop the strategy first, and then you translate those the objectives under the strategy into organize them around 4 themes: this financial, customer, operations, and learning and growth. Each objective is supported by a set of measures. So you measure how you achieve a goal or an objective through a set of measures or KPIs. And then you develop a portfolio of initiatives that help you to achieve those goals. And then you develop the monitoring and adjustment system mechanisms to put in place to constantly upgrade the system. Have you heard of these 2 systems? Not yet? Okay. If you're interested on the role of the goals and the goal setting in the management context, I would advise you to learn more about these 2 systems that will provide you more kind of systemic way of thinking of how to leverage the goals to manage organizations. So how to set goals? The dreams are important, but they are not goals. So let's not confuse the dreams with the goals. Goals should be concrete, time-bound. The stretch goals are the most motivating ones. An example of the stretch goal would be, in your case, let's say you want to graduate this program successfully. The stretch goal might be you want to graduate this program at the 5% of the top of the class. And you can see how the difference between how motivational these 2 different goals. The stretch goal should be ambitious, but yet to be realistic. The goals are driven by what is really important for oneself, for ourselves. And also the collective goals are the most powerful ones. Take an example of an electricity. Electrons, while moving chaotically, don't create electricity. Once they move into one direction, synchronize, they create this powerful phenomenon we call it electricity that completely changed our civilization. So there's a huge and radical difference between the individual goals and the goals that can be synchronized towards many actors. An order of magnitude difference. Think about that. That's the very, very, very. Think about the laser. Same concept. The dispersed light can have no effect, rather than the focused light can have huge power. How to achieve goals? I want to tell another story. During the World War I, the Austro-Hungarian troops were lost in Alps. And when completely lost, they couldn't find a way out, and they were desperate. And then suddenly, some of the soldiers found a map. They followed the map, they found the way out, and finally they were saved. And paradoxically, after they were out of the Alps, they discovered that the map was not of the Alps, but was of the Pyrenees, a complete different set of mountains. So what story it tells us? We know that all the mental maps we develop to achieve our goals are wrong, to some point. But we need some maps. We need a map, even if it's wrong, to prompt an action. To prompt an action, and in an action we can adjust our goals and activity, but we need some sort of focus map. The second important factor in the ways to achieve the goals is focus. Focus is very important. You might have heard famous stories by Steve Jobs telling that he told no to thousands of ideas and projects, just getting focused on a very, very few. You probably heard of Isaac Newton. That was one of the grand scientists of our times, and he's one of the major traits was he could be very hyper-focused on one idea at a time, without any distraction. So this idea of focus is becoming more and more important in the management context as well, and there are plenty of books telling about the importance of focus on execution. And discipline. Discipline, you can have goals, but without the discipline, they may become just dreams, just nice dreams. You can draw from your experience of preparing for exams, right? If you don't have a discipline in place, you're not going to fare well in your exams, right? And action bias. Action bias is when you are not paralyzed by analysis, but you start with action. You're not just sitting and dreaming and analyzing and over-rationalizing things and course of action and outcomes, but rather start acting, getting some information by interacting with the real world and then adjusting your actions again. The challenge here is that the goal setting, the start or the insight require a completely different set of skill set and mindset than what is required for execution. The execution culture requires totally different mindset and skill set. That's why in many startups, startup founders are later on replaced by more mature CEOs. Because the CEOs, the most accomplished management experts and CEOs, they're more focused on execution. Rather, startup founders, in many cases, they're more visionary, they're more kind of starters than doers. So that's the challenge. When there is a combination of these two skill sets in one personality, then it's a really unique phenomenon, and it's a very high-performing people. Okay. Okay. Just in order to summarize this first segment of our discussion, I want to throw a question to the audience. Do we really know what we want? Are we what our desires drive us towards? Do we really have a free will in the era of targeted marketing? Can we know our goals prior to action? Have you ever thought about this? That I think the modern era is shaped by the idea of free will or individualism. That's based on the idea that people should be free to want whatever they want and try to achieve whatever they want. But my fundamental question is whether we know what we want. whether the desires that drives us towards something, some goal, is it us? Or is it shaped by some other factors? Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe we can discover our goals only after being engaged in an action for a while. Maybe we cannot come up with a clear goal for ourselves just a priori or theoretically. Maybe we have to engage in an action so that we can discover our true goals. That's my hypothesis, that's my question to you that I wanted you to reflect upon it. Do you have any questions so far or any ideas? Everything is clear or nothing is clear? You are thinking, okay, you are engaged in thinking, okay. Okay, now we move on to the leaders. Let's think about the goal setting in the context of the leaders. So, I want to make an argument that collective goal setting is the fundamental leadership trait. That's one of the fundamental leadership traits. Leaders should have the ability to set the goals for many people, not for themselves. That's what distinguishes leaders from others or from the followers. The power of collective goals depends on the sincerity of intentions. If your team is sincere in pursuing the collective goals, then it's very powerful. If your team is just saying, yeah, we are okay with the general goals, but in reality they don't believe in their goals, you're not gonna go far away. The impact of collective goals may increase exponentially depending on the number of people engaged. Say you set a goal for yourself, that's good, that's powerful. But you set a goal for 2 people, that's much more powerful. You set a goal for 5 people and they share it. The impact may go exponentially very high. And then you set a goal for a company. The impact increases by an order of magnitude. You set a goal that is shared by a large community. The impact goes much higher. And it's not linear, it's exponential. What I'm trying to make a point is that the impact is not linear. Do you know the exponential function? Right? Okay. And imagine you are engaged in setting a goal for a nation.
Question. Some of my some students here are my students taking communications course, and I'm interested in how do you communicate those goals. I mean, setting the goal is very important, yes, but you have to engage in that goal a lot of people so that they believe and it becomes a shared goal. So my question is there any recommendation on how to communicate those goals efficiently and engage and excite people?
First of all, I made a point about a sincerity of intentions. First of all, you have to be frank. You have to live with the goal you are propagating, you are preaching. Otherwise, you can reflect on this issue by thinking about the Velvet Revolution that happened a year ago in Armenia. That's a classic example of that. So the leaders should be frank. And the frankness and sincerity gives the huge power. Second, in terms of the communication, I think one of the most powerful tools is storytelling. Because you can bring a lot of rational arguments. That's okay, but that's not the way people are getting inspired, and they can relate to the reality you are talking about. But by storytelling, they can relate to especially if that's very relevant to their context. So the great leaders, if you examine their lives, most of them were great storytellers. They're telling the story. The story is also, the stories about the future, the imagined stories. By the way, the communities and the nations are sometimes considered to be imagined communities. Because think about the organization or think about the nation. They don't exist, right? They don't physically exist. They exist in a concept. An organization, it's a name, and what else? There's no physical substance. Anyway, okay, it's building, but the concept of it, it's imagined community, it's imagined organization. And in order to consolidate the power of people to follow one goal, you have to tell the story of that imagined community, of that imagined organization. Decisions. Okay, we just wrap up this first part of the goal setting and we move on to the decisions part. Remember that the triangle, decisions, values. We're not going to talk about the values today. We're going to talk only about the decision part. So the decisions are one of the most high-stake human activities because you make decisions and there are implications and consequences. And these are the most energy-intensive human activities. Even if you think that, okay, studying a calculus or differential equations is the most energy-intensive activity for yourself in your current stage of the life, it's not. I would like to make an argument that the decision-making is more energy-intensive. You spend more energy, particularly on high-stake decision-making. Okay, so how you make decisions? That's another set of questions that we're gonna reflect on. Okay, how you make decisions in full uncertainty? Because if you have some certainty that's more or less clear, right? But how you make decisions in the conditions of full uncertainty? Okay, I wanna bring some examples from my professional activities. We are investing in early stage startups that basically have a team, some product, sometimes and very often no customer, no revenue. And we have to make a decision to invest. How we make a decision to invest? How we can analyze these companies? What do we do? So first approach is to buy options. What typically we do, not in all cases, but in most of the cases, we buy an option. What does that mean? Say we invest a small amount and see how it goes. We may lose that amount, but we may also, by investing that small amount, we are getting engaged with the company. So we buy an opportunity to invest in follow-on rounds. That's why when after some period of time, we have some incremental information. More information than we had before, and so we can make decisions. So you have to pay some cost, but that cost is justified, right? So you make some, another example. How do you make a marriage decision? Very hard question, right? Very high stake, and very uncertain, full of uncertainty, decision making in uncertainty. So humans inventing an institution called engagement, Neshamvel. Okay, so that's an option.
Trial version.
That's an option. You buy an option. You get engaged. There's cost to that. But you get an incremental information. And then you make a final decision. Is that right? Okay. There is another way of thought telling that, okay, follow your heart or your gut feeling. If you're uncertain, you can analyze, just follow your gut feeling, your intuition. That's very dangerous, actually. That's very dangerous because your gut feeling or your instincts or your intuition may misguide you. Why? Because you are full of biases. You are full of biases because you are driven by some, I would say, desires that you can hardly control. And we had this question about whether we know what we want, right? So that's a bit dangerous. Although you can follow that when you can try clean yourself from all your biases. Try to clean yourself from all of your desires, and then try to listen to your heart. And a second tip on that is you can bet on people. In early stage investing, for us, the most important criteria when investing in startups is not the product, is not the market, is the people who are behind the product. Because they do a lot of pivots in the course of developing their product. You know what is pivot? So when they change the product they're developing and then they tweak it, they adjust it. So we bet on people, but that also may backfire. Two investments we made with the primary when we bet on people where the product was very early stage. One was one of the our most successful investments, which we already exited and sold our stake for a very good profit, and the company is still not making the revenue. That was a bet on a people there, and they developed a product that has a very good customer engagement. The second time when we bet on a person, paradoxically, the company is not performing well, although the person was very energetic, very competent and knowledgeable. So it's a very high risk. It's important, but you have to acknowledge that it's very subjective and very high risk. But there is another way to approach it. When you try to optimize for an outcome for a series of decisions rather than just a one. Let's say in our case we try to optimize for a portfolio performance, not for the performance for one company. So we invest in a number of companies and try to optimize the performance of the portfolio, not the performance of one individual company. Then you have the opportunity to use what I would call an evolutionary formula. You create a variety and you see what works. You select what works and you bet on what works. Basically by selecting and scaling that. So that's the formula of evolution. You remember a little bit about biology? Charles Darwin, no? Okay, that's the same approach that we, particularly in the venture industry, employ, but also in many domains of life. You employ the same question, the same approach when you try to optimize for the overall outcome, but not for the outcome of the individual decision. Okay. Oh, you might have also heard about this lean startup method that is also based on that notion of action bias and the iteration. Have you heard of the lean startup method? Basically, it's the method that is very popular now in the startup realm to build quickly, develop a rapid prototype or a minimum viable product, throw it to the market, get the customer feedback, measure that, learn about the outcomes, and then feed that into your building the next version of your product. So that's the action bias I was talking about. So basically, you act, you get more information, you readjust, and then you try again. Okay, critical decisions. Now, oh, by the way, question so far about decisions in uncertainty we talked about. It's clear? Okay. Now, let's talk about the critical decisions. Okay, once you have some time to reflect on the consequences of your decisions, that's one story. But another story when you have to make critical decisions in a very short time frame. How do you do that? I'll give you an example. I was 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, I was as part of a crew making a film about having presence in the Holy Land. I was climbing the Mount Ararat. I was at about level 3,800. I started to feel very, very bad because of the lack of the oxygen. You start feeling very bad, right? You know that. And then my hands started to freeze. And two people from the group had gloves, and they offered additional gloves to me, and I stopped. I put the gloves, and suddenly I noticed that the rest of the group is already far away. I couldn't even see them. And then these two people, they decided to go down because they couldn't afford going up. So I'm at the around 4,000 meters high, myself alone on the mountain, feeling very bad. And I have to make a decision. I go up or I go down. That's the only choice I have. Staying at the same level, there's no choice. It's too difficult. Either you go down or you go up. So what do you do? Suggest the help. Oh, shall we get? Any ideas?
Estimate the situation which is important, the goals that you want to achieve.
And do like the cost-benefit analysis, understand what are the risks and whether you are ready to take that risk going up.
Okay, let's do. What's the cost and what's the benefit? If you are able at that time to think about that, okay. Let's assume you are able. Because your brain is also frozen.
No, but first of all, you should think about your abilities. Because maybe you really want to go up, but you are not ready to go because you are alone with it. Maybe whether you are experienced on going up, climbing the mountains or not. Depends on your experience. I mean, you know better whether you are able to go up even alone or some, I don't know how many kilometers. I mean, it's us to decide because we know ourselves for that.
Yeah, just to give you also a piece of additional information. The base camp was like at around 3,000 level. So it wasn't also easy to go down. And you know the height of the Ararat is 5,165, right? I'm at 4.
I would just stop, take a break a little bit, and just evaluate your body. I mean, how ready it is to go, because it's a gut feel. You understand your body, and then take another step to go up, because your final goal is there, and then you don't want to, you don't want to stop. You have to take a break, measure your all the capabilities, and then still having in mind to go up.
Okay.
I think a rational choice would be going down with the two, because you said that you are feeling bad and you don't know what will happen with you if you will alone continue to plan the year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I will go up because if both going down and going up are not easy, I choose going up because I already set the goal to climb the mountain, so I will just go. One question.
Yeah.
I think here we came to the point that you have already told us that we have to leave our biases and try to understand the central intuition, how I feel. If I leave everything behind, my fears, my biases, and what I feel, what my intuition tells me, can I go? But do I want to go up?
Okay.
Or do I
Yeah.
want to go down?
Very good point. Yeah, please.
Can I ask a question? I just want to know what was the difference between going up alone and with the group, because if the only problem is that we are alone, it's only going up or going down is the same thing. If we are able to go up alone, we should just go up. But if we are alone, it is the problem, going down.
Yeah. Generally, it's quite dangerous because you need some help in some situations.
But only going up, not going down.
Same.
So that's going up.
No, but also imagine if you go up, you have less oxygen.
Now.
If you go down, you have more oxygen,
So if
a little bit more.
But these two people, they decided to go down and they were going down? Or
Yeah, they went down. Yeah.
I also was wondering where was the leader, because
Oh, there.
but how come they just
The
left?
leader was a Kurd
Oh,
who was used
okay.
to climb the mountain for a few times a day.
Yeah, but they have to take the responsibility as well for
He's a
their
Kurd, but he doesn't care.
in the real
I
life.
think it's also important how important it was for you to go and to see the people. It's when you find someone that's alcohol and you came on the hazard, you don't think, oh, I will give up. You think how to work on that hazard, to overcome it, how to overcome the obstacle. And maybe you can think of how to work with your body. Like, for example, when I'm facing your husband in winter, for example, in this kind of thing, I'm thinking of more more warmer situation. Maybe you can think like that, or you can imagine that there is oxygen. You can work on your mind, because mind really plays a big role in your decision making and in your situation as well. And I think if you were able to climb 4,000 meters, you will be able to work on yourself and to keep going, because it's what really important when you are going to your goal. Keep going and
Very good. These are all valid arguments, but I tell you that in that situation you are not able to think that way, and totally cannot separate yourself from your biases and try to analyze. You have the flow of arguments on your head, but these are not systematized. These are not like, they come and go. They come and go. The arguments different type of ideas, come and go, come and go. In reality, what happened?
But you should rely on your experience. That's it. For example, did you plan before?
No.
No?
That was the first time. So, are you curious to know what happened?
Yeah.
So, as you can see, I'm alive. So, the different thoughts were flying and arguments were flying into my head, not very well shaped. But then in that flow, one just clicked. You have that experience, right? When it clicked, and that's you convinced that's right. And the idea was, and the thought was the following: if I die, I better die over there than over there.
Wow.
That was a rational argument for me at that critical time, and as you can see, I didn't die. So.
So the determination. What?
Oh, by the way, yeah, my argument is that you have sometimes the beauty of decision that drives you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You wouldn't find that in any decision-making textbook or theory or whatever, but this is what happens in reality. The life is much diverse, and the decision-making is much more diverse than what can be described in textbooks and over-rationalized. Okay, so let's consider two scenarios. Post-factum, once our decisions were right, and once our decisions proved to be wrong. I want to make an argument that luck is not a good decision. Even if you made a decision, and it turns out post-factum that it was right, but your argumentation, this is not in critical situations, we're talking about more stable situations, right? This is not a good decision, even if it was the right thing post-factum. I'll give an example. We analyzed a company that was trying to produce drones. We passed that company twice. We didn't invest. And given that we came to the conclusion that the drone market is very saturated and the Chinese are very competitive, there is no way to beat them in the market, and we decided to pass the investment. And then, after a while, the company pivoted and was focused on developing analytics by taking images from drones or airplanes rather than just developing drones. And then the third time, we made a decision to invest in a company at much higher valuation that was initially available to us. Right? It should be higher valuation because it's in a later stage. So, but we thought that our decision was right, even if we invested in a company at a higher valuation that we could. We still think that we made a right decision because we made a right decision on the right grounds, on the right analysis. However, it's important to understand also that uncalculated factors that you cannot estimate, are very important. Life is very complex, and it's not easy to calculate all of the factors and factor into your processing model. That's why we talked about this evolution formula, the creating variety and then selecting and then scaling up. Here as well, it works because in the evolution tells that the fittest survive. But that's in general terms. That's not about individual. Individually, that could be the survival of an individual can be influenced by a chance or unintended, uncalculated factors. That's the law of evolution, the law of life. That's why you have to take that into account as well. Once decisions were wrong, that's the other scenario. What if the decisions were wrong? First of all, you have to be prepared to stand for consequences. You have to be prepared. You have to know that there are some consequences that your decisions can bring to, and you have to be prepared yourself in advance. In venture investing, it's very psychologically hard, because you invest and there's very big chance you can fail. You can lose your capital. And you have to be prepared for that. That's not the game for everyone. But the wrong decisions or the failure also provide you an opportunity to learn. You might have come across the famous story by Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, about that he applied to Harvard for 10 times and he was rejected 10 times. He applied for a job for KFC, 24 people applied, 23 were accepted except him. And he's one of the wealthiest men in the world. So it's amazing how he kept trying the same thing. Like, can you imagine applying to Harvard 10 times? Take in your personal concept, would you apply to a university 10 times? Can you imagine the perseverance with which this guy is trying to achieve his goals? So perseverance is very important to cope with the consequences of the failure and the wrong decisions. And also an important aspect of failed decisions or the failures or the wrong decision is that it may help you to be more humble. To acknowledge that not everything in you can control, that you are not a Superman, and you become more humble. Because sometimes success creates the grounds of failure for people that they don't acknowledge. They're just human people with a very limited capacities. And it's very important to learn from the failures, and especially in our context of venture investing, when we get an application from a founder that in the past tried to do a startup, failed, and compared to a founder that is starting his own first company, we probably have a preference for the first, because he learned a big lesson on his own experience. Please.
Sorry, just kind question, but there is a reason why I'm asking. Whether this founder of Alibaba, did he graduate Harvard?
No.
It seems he didn't keep on moving and he didn't reach this goal. He just maybe moved to another one. It's not keeping on the same thing, but maybe you should be flexible and change it.
Of course. Sometimes after 10 times you have to acknowledge that you are not fit to Harvard. That's right.
Because it doesn't.
But
Yeah.
there's another story. Do you know about this game Angry Birds?
Yeah.
Okay, you know. This was the company that was creating games. The team was creating games. They were constantly failing. The game, the Angry Birds game, was their 52nd game. So they failed 51 games.
So they got very angry.
They got very angry, probably, and they told, "This is our last game we're going to create. If this is not successful, we're going to abandon it." And the last one was, maybe if Jack Ma tried the 11th time, it could have been successful. I don't know, but that's the reality. Okay, we also need to acknowledge that our decisions have impact on others, that our decisions have intended or unintended consequences, and there's a complex interlinkage between these consequences, the unintended and the intended consequences. Our decisions has their implications on the lives of others, especially when you are in a leadership position. I fired my first firing decision of an employee that worked for me when I was 25 years old. After the firing that person, after that decision, I was sick for 1 week. That was very tough decision. Very, very tough decision. In order to make fair decisions, you need to, it requires time and energy, because when you make decisions on spot, you don't take into account all of the potential consequences, and you don't particularly also empathize or with another person that decision may impact. So it takes time to think about that, and it takes energy. So if you are confronted with a decision that may have a high impact on others, on the lives of the other, it's better to take some time and to put some energy into that. Otherwise, there might be consequences that you may try to cope with, and some maybe not able to cure. And also very important that the communication is key. You have to communicate with people to explain why the decisions are made this way or not the other way around. I had an experience of making decisions that impacted some people in a negative way, but after that decision, these people were not, I would say, had a negative feeling towards me because of the right communication. I have the opposite examples. When I made quick decisions, but then where people were very much dissatisfied, although it didn't impact them very much negatively, but because I didn't communicate properly why the decision is made in such a way, what are the causes, what are some of the arguments, because you have a kind of a natural assumption that people understand why you do this or that. People don't, and you need to be careful in that. That's a critical critically important for especially the leaders that make decisions that impact others. Let me summarize with the notion of that our future is imagined through our goals, but our history is written by our decisions.